All right. Well, welcome everybody to Lindsley Avenue Church of Christ, our Wednesday night class. Thanks for everybody who's here. Thanks for those of you that are watching either again live, remote. Come on down and see us sometime, or live or remote later, I guess would be the proper way of saying it. Tonight we're finishing the study of why I believe, and of course with any study, many times you only really scratch the surface. My plan is to continue to record some of these lessons and put them on Facebook, perhaps even for Wednesday nights, as we're going to start another class series and or potentially do some discussion down here at the building. So keep your eyes peeled to the Lindsley Avenue Facebook page. But with this summary, it's called The Rest of the Story, just trying to bring some things together and talk about it. But yet, as part of request, we are going to review, so I thought I'd go through the blood clotting cascade again. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. For one of the longer, more detailed things we had, why on earth did I ever put this stuff up here a couple of weeks ago? Well, first of all, this is an incredibly complicated thing that I do not myself completely understand. I wasn't a biochemistry major, I'm not a doctor, but each of these steps needs to be there in order for blood to clot, which is a relatively common thing for most of us. I mean, if you ding your knee on the table, sometimes you'll get a cut. All of this had to come about by a real happy set of accidents. Why would you have had step 10 happen without steps 1 through 9 happen, and without all the steps, it was really hard to imagine. So that's why I did it. It was complex on purpose. I chose it because it was complex, but I totally understand. I mean, you heard me trying to pronounce the words. No, I put this up here, we're not going to talk about it tonight. I do want to pick up, however, with the next question. If you talk to someone, and there's still many more arguments you could provide for why I believe in God or why somebody might believe in God. If you get someone to say, okay, I see the need for a first cause or a designer or a source of all good and morals, or, I see that there is something, right? A divine being, a divine here simply meaning outside of time and space. That's pretty divine to all of us. Would this God reveal anything to humanity? If I say there's a first mover or a designer, why would you think, tell me, Gene, why would you think they care about any of us here on planet Earth? Why would I want to go immediately and start opening a Bible or a Quran or the Hindu Vedas or whatever? Why would I think this first mover, this first cause, revealed anything to us? So let's talk about that for a couple of minutes. It's going to be a hodgepodge. I got a couple of things to talk about. Well, there are some issues associated with this question, right? Some individuals become convinced that God, quote marks here, so we're not talking necessarily about God of the Bible. God, as we have defined it so far in the study, exists for various reasons, yet deny that this God has revealed anything to us. You've got to show. Why would you think this God has spoken or written or even knows we're here, right? So, in this case, God is there, but is not talking to us, is not interested in us, or doesn't care whether we're here. So when you're thinking about that, these individuals, classically, or you might call them deists or theists, when the founding fathers of America, when you think about the people in history we know of Jefferson and Washington and others, many of them were actually, when they used God language, were deists or theists. They were not Christian in the normally understood sense of the word. Several of them believed that there was a watchmaker or a designer or a creator who kind of wound it up as a top and just kind of threw the universe out there and really doesn't care what's going on here and now. So they would see potentially no evidence that the creator is active today. Okay, if you say first cause, poof, the universe is in existence. That's it. That's all you convinced me of, Gene. So the universe is here. Something made it here. It's a shame we don't know anything about it. Or why would I think now that they care whether I go out and drink or whatever I do next, right? So God left the universe to develop on its own. Think of a spinning top, and it's still spinning on the table. God wound the clock, left it running. Otherwise, he doesn't care anything at all about any of us. So how can you tell if God has revealed anything, right? You could consider several things that would contribute to me thinking that it was reasonable that this first cause, this designer, this source of moral good would in fact reveal things to us. So when you're thinking of this, I look at the nature of the universe's fine-tuning. We talked about that. There are so many specific factors and conditions that have to be there for the earth to have life on it and for life to be stable here on the earth. It just screams to show design and care and specific creation. It's one thing if you take shelter under a branch that has a lot of leaves on it that fell against a tree and you manage to not get wet from a rainstorm. It's another if you walk around the corner and you find what appears to be a Hilton hotel that has automated room service that is still the same kind of thing of anything in time and space is bound to happen at least once. So in that kind of situation, this anthropic principle, anthropos, humanity, men, women, it's just a principle that things seem to be devised for man or designed for man and women, humanity. Sometimes called the Goldilocks principle. Everything seems to be just right here. So in this sense, a creator that caused the universe to begin certainly was concerned enough that all these different physical principles and the laws of nature and the location of even when you get down to the earth, its rotation rate, its axial tilt, the amount of oxygen in the air, the amount of water, we didn't talk about some of these, but having a large planet like Jupiter further away from us, which over time slings comets out of orbit, so there are fewer and fewer things that might come in and smack us upside the head. I would suggest here that this creator that caused all that was concerned enough at the moment the universe is called into existence, all the rules were set. With any change in them in the smallest degree, life would not be possible today. Whenever that creation was, whether it's a shorter time ago or a long, long time ago, it doesn't change the fact that the laws have been set where there's a lot of potential values, but they're set just right. Goldilocks principle. There's also a large number of conditions for the earth. We talked about that, the distance from the sun. If you think that the universe has been around a long time, the earth happens to be at a distance where a long time ago the sun was cooler, according to what we're told. And so by being where it is now, it would have been warm then, but as the sun has grown hotter over time, it's still not so close that it's burning up. So how interesting for liquid water and other things to be on the surface of the earth. All these different things have to be precisely set. If I care about something, I put a lot of effort and time into it, and I'm very meticulous about something, as opposed to, oh yeah, it's over there in the corner somewhere, where you're not even sure where it is. Think of people who are focused on craftsmanship. They put a lot of time and effort into it, as opposed to me making a wood birdhouse, which the bird even just flies past, not even interested in trying to sleep in it. In the second place, we've talked here about the nature of the creator. Paying attention to us suggests the creator is concerned with the universe and the earth, and so it makes me confident that creator certainly sure seems that it would be interested in humanity. In addition to giving us a source of good, the voice of conscience, which has been called the voice of the divine in your head, to the point of enabling life on earth. So the case for this involvement in terms of the fine-tuning that we continue to see and discover continues to grow. Remember the quotes we had up here from people who are not believers. It sure seems like there's design. We had those in the handout. The odds of things being here by chance are better, or worse rather, lower than solving a Rubik's Cube blindfolded. They see that it's just highly, highly unlikely, but aren't we happy that unlikely things happen is the choice they make, as opposed to seeing whether it could be a first cause, a God, a designer, And if that God is so concerned that we've been set up here in a Goldilocks kind of place, it's just right for people, maybe we should try to see if that God has revealed anything to us. So when you look at this, right, these fine tunings to me don't show apathy or a lack of concern toward creation. Again, it's one thing if you just find stuff thrown in the corner, but it's much more like there's been this craftsmanship to make things just right from the whole universe perspective, all the way down to things as relatively maybe unthought of as having 20% oxygen in the atmosphere as opposed to 40 or as opposed to 5. So another way to look at this in terms of would God reveal anything to humanity is to assume for a moment, suppose this Creator did. If you suppose or if you assume that the Creator did not, then the game's over, the story's over. So why not assume for a minute that the Creator did reveal something? Go and look at things that say they came from Creator or God and evaluate those with the nature of the Creator caring about humanity. So simply look at revelations that say they come from God and ask a couple of questions. Does this revelation show signs of being from God or not? Does this revelation pass a test as having come from God? What should that test be? Well, how would you evaluate? I mean, there's many things that claim to be from the Creator. There's the Bible, and there's the Bible of the Jewish people. There's the scriptures of the Jewish people. There's the scriptures from the writings from Christians. There's the Quran. There's writings that make up the teachings of the Buddha and Hindu, and those are just the major world religions. Well, I would suggest if you really are coming at this with, I really haven't thought about a Creator existing, it's time to start digging and see whether does anything pass a test. What should this test be? Well, at the minimum, you would tend to think that if this Creator made the universe, that the Creator can write coherent sentences, that the Creator would not get facts confused. The Creator wouldn't talk about a circle having 3 corners. You know, if you have a writing that says this came from the Creator, all circles have 3 corners. If you read that sentence in the opening part of it, you would go, nah, that's not passing the smell test of being from a Creator that would have created the universe potentially out of nothing, designed that blood clotting cascade, right? So it should as well not be messed up historically. You wouldn't expect to find references to Bigfoot in the revelation from a Creator. Bigfoot doesn't exist. And it should also have historical accuracy. Some of the books that are not in the Bible but were from the religious period of the Old Testament, we talked about these a year or so ago, the Apocrypha. In one of them, I think it's the book of Judith is one I'm thinking of here. The army somehow manages to get from Assyria over to Judah in 3 days. That is not going to happen. They also go the wrong direction. Whoever wrote that didn't know geography very well, right? So if that truly was what you were thinking came from a Creator, how can the Creator put Egypt over north of the Himalayas or something like that, right? You wouldn't expect any geographical, you wouldn't expect any historical, you wouldn't expect obvious, straight out scientific inaccuracies. So that's one test it ought to pass. Revelations that don't pass this test really just need to be, I appreciate what may be in here, but I don't think so, right? So what kind of tests should there be, right? You would examine them more closely if it did. Think of a scientific test. The universe began. Science screams that loudly. Religious texts that claim to be from the Creator that don't have a creation in them should not pass the test. And there are some that will tell you that there's an infinite cycle that has been going on forever and will continue to go on forever. Well, of humanity's existence. Humanity has not been here forever. There's no way, no matter how old things may turn out to be, right, in terms of the universe or the earth, there's no infinite past of people here on the earth because the universe came into existence. So for me, I would look at a revelation that talks about an infinite cycle that's never ending for people who are alive here on the earth and say, thank you, but no. Thank you, but no. So that would not pass the scientific test. It needs to have a creation in it, at the very minimum. If no revelation passed those kinds of tests, and I'm talking basic, is it wrong on history? Is it wrong on science? You know, does it have internal contradictions and stuff like that that you're just too hard, you can't even find a way to jive them or anything? Then you would say, did God reveal himself to any of us? No. If there's no revealed knowledge, then there's certainly no organized way this creator would have revealed themselves to us. You might then think, all right, let's get mystical. Maybe this creator reveals himself to me when I sit under a cherry tree or something. I don't know. You could have other ways, but you might end up needing to decide, no, I think there's a creator that made everything, but I see no evidence that creator has tried to communicate to us. So that's really one of the reasons I look at this and try to say, if you convince someone that there is a creator, there's a designer, there's a first mover, there's a source of good, get the person to say, I can't prove whether God revealed anything to humanity, but let's assume for a minute that that this creator did. Do any of the revelations pass the test you would expect of a creator that fine-tuned everything so it would be just right for us? If you think no after looking at them, you know, then maybe you don't think there's a creator that wants to talk to us. Other things you would look at, I find it's inconceivable to me that a creator that fine-tuned everything would have a revelation that would put the majority of the human race in a subservient position. There's more women on the earth than men. And so a revelation from a creator that put women as second-class citizens, right, is not something that I would see as having come from a fine-tuned creator. And so that's how I look at these things. And of course, obviously, Christianity is the revelation that I believe came from the creator. And so for me, I know I'm skipping ahead. I said I wouldn't do this, but I'm skipping ahead. There is no difference between male and female in terms of the creator's view of humanity. You don't find in the New Testament women being told to get out of the way. You don't find them being told that this good news is not for you. And you find statements like that in some of the other religions. I'm not calling names, but you do. So at the very least, right, the creator should not have a message to us that says, oh, those 51% of people walking on the earth, they don't matter. You do as a man or something like that. You would tend to think that it's not going to be a religion that would allow a man to benefit, I'm using that word in quote marks, from situations that would put women on the short end of the stick. And I'm thinking of polygamy, for example. And it's almost certain that religions that set that up sure seem to have a component that's having been started by a guy, right? I mean, let's just face it. I doubt the ladies thought that one up. Why don't we all get together and we'll all have this one husband over here? And so when you find this kind of thing, what is that fundamental relationship between men and women? How's that described again in the New Testament? No, I'm talking about the New Testament, but with the last class I want to do that. Husbands, love your wives, even as Jesus loved the church and gave himself for it. And the meaning of that is, men ought to love their wives enough that as Jesus died for the church, the man ought to die for his wife. The woman's never told to do that. She's not. And I remember saying that when I was in Africa, and some of the men in the class said, no. And their thought was like, I could get another wife. And I'm like, the women are in here, guys. What are you thinking? What are you thinking? But that seems like that's counterintuitive to what you would expect if a bunch of guys got together and wrote something. You would tend to think, yeah, either no marriage at all and just chase who and whatever you want, or get as many as you want. But no, it puts the onus on a man to love his wife and be willing to die for her. That at least is the kind of message I would expect in terms of a creator that's not only fine-tuned the world, but to properly value everybody who's on the earth. And so all the hospitals have their roots in Christian behavior of caring for people. I mean, all that kind of stuff, right? So there's a reason I look at Christianity for lots of things. I also want to talk about one other thing real quick. I told you it would be a hodgepodge. Sometimes people get to the point of believing that there's a creator, but they say, I just can't get that final step because if this creator you describe is out there, there's just too much wrong with the world. Too much wrong with the world. I don't believe that a creator would let these kind of things happen. So that's often called the problem of evil. The problem of evil, or why bad things happen to good people, or why bad things happen to bad people. Why should we care if bad, I mean, it's not just enough to say bad things shouldn't happen to good people. Why don't we say bad things shouldn't happen at all? Right? I don't want bad things to happen to a bad person. I don't want bad things to happen to a good person either. Why do bad things happen at all? So that's a big problem. People see the news. People hear about bad things that happen to people. And for some people, I can't get there. I can't get to what you're telling me is a all-powerful, good creator or God, and yet this is the world I live in. So human suffering, it's usually three statements that are made, a formal argument. People don't usually go through this logic when they don't believe because of evil, but essentially it comes from this. You tell somebody that God is all good and God is all powerful, and if those two things are true, what we're told is this third one should be false. So how can you have an all-good God and all-powerful God and evil still here? Right? So sometimes people will say God's not all good. God likes evil. Well, if God were like a human being, right, we do good things, and sometimes, unfortunately, we do bad or evil things, then you would be denying number one. There could be a creator, but we're just out of luck that this creator hates us sometimes, right? Or God is all good, but God just can't quite squash evil. That's another potential way of a problem. If God's there and God's all good, he must be a pretty weak God, or otherwise he wouldn't make us go through all this stuff. Or you get some people that say, well, maybe evil's not real. Well, that's kind of hard to turn on the nightly news and see that. So what do you do with this? There's been a couple of problems, right? If God is all good and all powerful, he, assuming it's a he, right, you'd have to talk about that stuff too, would not allow evil to exist in the world. Since evil seems to exist, then God is either not all good or not all powerful, right? So several responses have been created. This is a big problem in philosophy. Talk about this. Philosophers talk about this all the time. In the 3rd century AD, this individual named Mani had a religion that was roughly Christian, but his followers, they rejected the Old Testament and they thought Jesus was just a really good guy. I said again, it was roughly Christian. But they taught that the people in this universe, there's two forces struggling for domination, the evil force and a good force. Dualism, right? And that's not what Christians are talking about when they talk about God and the devil. There is the devil in Christianity of trying to talk about, convince people to do bad things, but God is still all powerful and the devil's future is set. So that's not the same thing as this. So they were relieved of any sense of guilt. Evil came from an evil side of me and good came from a good side, so I'm not responsible when I do bad things. Well, that would be really sweet if you could avoid guilt. That'd be really sweet if you didn't have to worry about when you did bad things. I mean, wouldn't all of us like to not worry about stuff and feel bad if we did something that was considered evil? Well, evil things happen sometimes. That's just me. That's not a good thing to do it, right? So they saw the problem of evil, but they rejected the idea that God is all powerful. They said he's not. There's an evil force in the world and there's a good force, and they battle it out, and that's why you have evil. Well, that's one answer to it. You remove the idea of God being all-powerful. God is good. Whatever this evil force out here is evil, and they're fighting all the time, and we're just caught in the middle. We're just caught in the middle. Problem with that is that's not the God who's described in the Bible. God described in the Bible called the universe into existence. You tend to think that this God who says he's going to get rid of the devil at some point in the future would be able to squash evil from an all-powerful standpoint, right? So they believe evil and good have equal standing. Some people think that today. Some people think that, evil and good are duking it out here on the earth, and we don't know how it's going to go. We don't know how it's going to go. Others came up with an idea, or they borrowed some ideas from Plato. Plato, before Jesus, was a pretty smart guy. They held that evil had no substance, but was only a defection in good. Think of a perfect donut. I like donuts. A perfect donut. There's no evil donuts, but there's a problem in the donut if it's got a finger poke in it, right? It's not that the donut's evil, but there's a lack of good. It's not a perfect donut. So they simply redefined and said that all things are good insofar as they existed, but what you see evil, what you think of as evil is imperfection, like the poke in the donut, right? The poke in the donut. It's a corruption of the perfect good donut. Now, to be truthful, I'll eat a donut even if it's got a crease in it. I really won't. But these Neoplatonists, they denied evil existed. That's one way to get out of this argument. Evil doesn't exist. There's merely a lack of good. There's a defect. It's not evil. It's just this doesn't have, it's only at 90% good or something like that. That's a philosophy answer to the problem of evil. We'll deny the third proposition. God is all powerful. God is all good. Evil doesn't really exist. You just think it does. What you really have is a lack of good. That doesn't help you if you're on the receiving end of evil. That doesn't help you if you just had a problem happen to your family or a friend or something. Right? That doesn't happen. That doesn't help. So, good effort. That's one option, good effort, but. Then you had Augustine, about 400 AD. Augustine talked about apparently everything. And so he, at one point, believed in that dualism. Mani, he came out of that. He was pagan. He also believed in the ideas of Plato. Again, he grew up pagan and converted to follow Jesus later in life. He said evil did not exist by itself. It wasn't a defect in the goodness, but it was an absence of good. An absence of good. So when somebody's evil, they just don't have any good in them. And if they had good in them, then the evil wouldn't be allowed to exist. So if somebody's evil, right? Somebody comes in and smacks you upside the head. It's not that they're evil, they don't have any good in them. And so the way to fix that, it's like an empty bottle, right? It's not that the bottle has anything else in it, it has nothing in it. It's a lack of good. A lack of good. From a Christian standpoint, that's what he tried to talk about.
Sociopath.
If you're a sociopath, then you have nothing in you at all. So in that case, right, the mind is snapped or something like that. But what the idea? Think of a bottle, water bottle over here, right? It's not that the water bottle has something else in it. If it has no water, it doesn't have water in it. To be good, the bottle needs water in it. And so if somebody you think of them as evil, they just don't have any good. It's kind of redefining the argument again. That's what philosophers do. But he put it into a Christian viewpoint, right? He held the belief that everyone needs to love. And in fact, we have that song, right? All you need is love. All you need is love. So a person can focus love on four things, four objects. Things, other people, yourself, or God. I can't think of anything else you can focus love on. Things, objects, other people, yourself, or God, right? And all of these are proper objects of love if they're in the proper order. It's not wrong for me to love donuts. A million donuts? Okay, yeah, we could probably talk, but it's not wrong for me to love donuts. But it is wrong for me to love donuts if I eat the donut in the face of a hungry person. I should love the other person more than I love the donut. Okay, does that make sense? I think, right? Because I can't go loving this stuff over here when I've got my jacket. I sure hope you get one. No, that doesn't work. That becomes wrong. It's things that are out of order. It's good to love a donut. It's bad to love this donut if you love it more than somebody. And it's also bad to love potentially somebody else more than yourself. In the sense that you don't want to become just overly focused on somebody else. That can be bad both ways, right? If I love myself more than you, then it's kind of like me loving the donut more than you. But also some people will get themselves into trouble because they love somebody else and they forget to eat, this kind of stuff. You do need to make sure you drink and eat and all this kind of thing. So you can get these things out of whack. And then God as well. All these are proper objects for love. I mean, you want to take care of yourself. You want to take care of other people. It's okay to eat a donut. And it is perfectly required, you would think, to love God too, right? So look at how the problem would be. If I love money more than I love God, that's a problem. You said, the love of money, I know, is a root of all kinds of evil, but why do people get up and go to work and most mornings? Is to get this thing called money. We do need some money, and so you need to do what you need to do in order to survive, but I can't love money more than I love somebody else. And I'm thinking of your husband who gave a jacket away. One of the first things he did when he was here. I got another jacket here, take this one. He did not love that jacket more than the person. That's the way love should be. And so when you see evil, Augustine would say, something's out of whack. And this is an odd thing, right? It's an odd thing because when I look at things that are reported as evil, if you're watching the news, and I don't recommend doing that very much, but if you're watching the news, most things that you will hear that are evil, a lot of them are because something's out of order. Something's out of order. They love themselves more than they love, somebody else. You're in my way, that kind of stuff. So it's evil if you love food more than you love somebody who's hungry. It becomes evil. It's not evil to love food. I mean, I love Mexican food. I love donuts. I guess I'm hungry tonight. But it's really evil if I satisfy that love that I have at the expense of somebody. Or if I satisfy that love for food and say, well, I could love God, I could go serve God, I could worship God, but I'm going to go eat some more. You can get things out of whack. So the reason evil exists in the world, Augustine said, is because we get our love out of whack. And if we got things in the right order, then things would be better. Evil could go away if we had the proper focus of loving in the proper order. This is awfully good. This is awfully good because it does explain why some people are just messed up. Some people love donuts more than they love other people. That kind of thing. That's a reason why some evil exists. This is not all. This is not all evil, however. So you also have the book of Job. I will talk about the other evil, but Job. The answer presented to evil is that essentially we as humans won't be able to answer all the questions that God knows the answers to. This is we're looking in the front of the hood and God sees around the corner. Of all people in the Bible, Job could easily have been one to curse God and die. The things just keep coming in, right? He loses his livestock, he loses his servants, he loses all these different things, including his children. Boom, 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 boom. And the language of the book of Job is while they were still speaking, or while you could still hear the echoes, the next one came in. His wife told him to curse God and die. And then he ends up getting boils. All these kinds of things, right? So he eventually says, hey, what's up with this? When he's talking to God. Hey, I'm hurting down here. And God says essentially, where were you when I laid the foundation of the world? Who are you to be questioning me? You don't know what I know. And so to an extent, Job is told to have faith and patience, which is a hard thing to do if you're sitting there having lost all this stuff with boils all over your body. I don't think I would have been as patient as Job. Maybe he went through that for all the encouragement that it can give people who suffered in all the thousands of years since then. Again, I'm not being God. I don't know why God did this, but God says, I know more than you know. Quit thinking you know it all. It's kind of the answer of Job. This is the idea of a theodicy. God created the world in such a way to bring the most people to him. If everything were daisies and lollipops and unicorns, then I'm afraid most of us, or a huge percentage of us, would be like the rich fool, can we just be making our barns bigger? Imagine Willy Wonka, right? Everything's edible in Willy Wonka's factory. Walk out and just grab that daisy. Oh yeah, that kind of stuff. What happens many times to people when they become really, really rich? The temptation is, I care about a whole lot of other stuff. That's why riches and money can be a source of all different types of evil. It's hard to resist that. So this idea says that the world as it is, with everything that's going on in it, is in fact the best of all possible worlds, which is hard to imagine why. But best in terms of what? We're not here to be happy. We're not. I think we're here to get a knowledge of the Creator and share that knowledge with others. And so God, if God is in fact all-knowing and all-powerful, if you think of make the world a really easy place, make the world where nothing's easy, or where it's an all-good place, like the Garden of Eden, we're told it is, or fire and brimstone 24/7. Somewhere in between there, if you think of people who love God, it's going to go, I don't know what it looks like, but somewhere out here there's a high point. And so this argument suggests that this world is designed to bring the most possible people to know God. Given the percentage of people that seem not to know God, this must be a pretty low percentage anyway. But the argument is made that making it easier would not necessarily in any way make more people know God.
So it kind of, in my mind, it kind of means that when the world was created, there would be people that didn't know God. Because the most perfect way in order to develop the souls to live eternally with Him, that was the purpose.
Well, when the world was created, you had the Garden of Eden and Adam and Eve in it. And so they knew God because God spoke to them. But if God had this idea, right, I'm not necessarily saying this is what I think, but if God had kicked them out and the world outside the garden was still the garden, where they didn't have to work or do anything and nothing ever went wrong, that kind of life might not let people see God, or enough people. That's what this suggests. It suggests that you need some evil in the world, bad things, to wake some people up. Or, if nothing else, any easier than this and fewer people would come to know God. That's what that suggests. Other things, evils in the world. It's also, since there are evil people in the world, people who do evil things, having free will means there are consequences to having free will. We've talked about this some before. If I have free will, I can make my own choices. I can decide when I drive home tonight to go 140 miles an hour down the interstate. If I go 140 miles an hour down the interstate, first of all, the police might find me. These days they might let me go and show up at my house tomorrow. They'd probably track down where I was. But if I'm going 140 miles an hour down the interstate and I overcome the friction of my tires on the asphalt, is it God's fault if I wrap my car around the telephone pole? I would argue no. I'm the one making my choice to go 140 miles an hour. If I'm going 140 miles an hour and I lose friction, it's not God's fault if there happens to be somebody standing in front of the telephone and I smack them and the pole. There are consequences to free will, which means by my choices, I can suffer and sometimes other people can suffer. The only alternative to that is for me really not to have free will, not to be able to make choices that might hurt me or other people. Think of it as child-proofing the world. If you get grandkids that come over and they're young enough, we put the little latches so the door that has the Drano can't be pulled open. Or if you don't have those, you're in terror all the time. No, Johnny, don't eat the Tide Pod, or something like that. That's not the way you eventually learn. Eventually, my dad doesn't come over and tell me, Gene, don't run the vacuum cleaner. He doesn't. I grew up and I had to go out on my own. At some point, right, we need to be on our own and learn that actions have consequences. Otherwise, you end up with God reaching into the world. No, don't do that. You'll hurt yourself. And how many millions or billions of times a day would the Creator have to be doing that to keep us from ever learning If I do X, then Y may be the consequence. We learn, and sometimes we learn too late what the consequences are. So free will and consequences is a big part of it. I'm either a robot and I cannot choose, or I can choose to do something that will hurt me or somebody else. The only other alternative is to follow a program and be a robot. And then you get other things that are out here. I'll skip over this, it's in the handout. Other evils are called natural evils. And I had an older lady, I still don't know what she looks like. Years ago when I first talked about this, I was getting stuff together at the bottom, and she came up and set me straight on that over my shoulder. And I had no idea who she was. I assumed she came back to the class. God doesn't make natural evils. Well, personally, I don't tend to usually think of good things from floods, tornadoes, and hurricanes. Right? But if we found David Lipscomb's lamp in the basement and decided we could get some wishes by rubbing and polishing the lamp, right? And you had a genie come out of Lipscomb's lamp. There is no lamp down there. The worst thing you could decide to do would be to say, no more tornadoes. The world would be a worse place if tornadoes weren't there, because that would mean the mixture of hot air and cold air the world would go bonkers. Same thing with hurricanes. Why do you have hurricanes? The tropics being under the hot sun most of the day, the water gets really warm. Hurricanes form by hot air rising, right? And it carries that hot water up into the cooler regions. It helps keep the tropics around the equator from boiling. Now, it might not boil, but it's spreading the heat out. And it's not, I will very strongly say, it's not God's fault that we keep putting hotels right there on the Florida coast. Same thing with an earthquake. There's going to be an earthquake, I hope it's not anytime soon, that hits San Francisco again. It's not God's fault that after the 1906 earthquake, we built everything and made it a lot taller. These things, such as floods, tornadoes, and hurricanes, sometimes we make them worse ourselves. We cut all the trees down off the side of a hill, and so you end up with a flood and a mudslide. Or tornadoes, we cut all the trees down, and that causes air dispersal patterns to be different and causes funnel clouds. By the way, the tornado alley is moving. It's moving more over toward Alabama and Mississippi than it is Texas and Oklahoma, based on recent tornadoes. But if you thought if these are natural evils, then if I got a wish, I would say no more hurricanes. You probably just doomed us all. The world needs hurricanes in order to function.
So therefore they're not evil.
I will say they're not evil. They're called evil. People that see people who die in a hurricane, how could God let people die in a hurricane is the issue. For a tornado, right? The tornado killed some young children up in Cooking a couple of years ago. Where?
Madison.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not going to sit there and go, oh, I love tornadoes. No. But the world needs some things to function. And sometimes, much as if I'm standing on the side of a cliff and I'm there and it's when that cliff's going to let go, right? The world needs some things to function. Without them, things would be worse. How does that jive with children in a Bible class where the church building gets hit by a tornado and they all die? That happened as well. Only thing I can do for something like that is to go back to Job. Job said, how are you letting this happen to me? And God said, who are you? You don't know the way things are going to work out. I don't like that answer, but ultimately that's really the answer you fall back on when you can't explain something with disordered love, free will and consequences, natural things that the world just needs. Sometimes it has to come back to not cursing God and dying, but to rely on faith and put our hands in the one that fine-tuned and crafted things the way the Creator did. I don't like that answer when it's me wondering why this happened to me or somebody I love, but that's the only other answer I got.
You're going to have to refer back to Romans 8:28.
Eventually things will work out. It isn't any fun while you're waiting on that to happen. It's tough to find joy with it.
There is a belief by some people that God punishes us with those natural occurrences, which just making that comment because obviously that's, to me, it's obviously that's not the case.
The pagans believed that Zeus would send lightning bolts and strike people. I don't see anything in the New Testament that would suggest that tornadoes are sent to go kill people that God's mad at or something like that. One other thing, this is another part of it too. Why are these things going on in the world? The world as it is today is a fallen world. Sin entered the world, and the world's different than God made it for the Garden of Eden. How big was the Garden of Eden? I don't have any idea. Maybe it was the whole earth at the time. But God cursed the ground, and Adam and Eve had to work hard, and they had thorns and thistles and weeds. They had to work for it. And I truly believe they physically died because they left the presence of God, the tree of life, things like that. So if I get mad at how the world is today, I wonder sometimes if God's like, I told Adam and Eve not to eat from this one tree, this one thing. We all keep doing one thing. And when I sin, I'm just as guilty as if I had eaten the tree of life, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. I said tree of life, I meant the incorrect one. It's all still got to come down to, if I believe in a creator, then I need to have faith and trust. If I decide not to believe in a creator, then what's the big deal with evil? Remember we talked about that too? That's a real powerful thing. How can I have evil if there's no standard to judge evil? The really horrific example I made up of the person in the desert, Hitler. I mean, there's no evil. If I became convinced, if I ever became convinced, and pray and hope I never do, that there was no God, I wouldn't worry about anything. I would try not to get caught. I don't want to go to jail and spend my time in a little cell. But if you get away with something, why not? There's no right or wrong. There's no good or evil. There can't be. There is no way to explain why something would always be evil. Yeah, I know at the margin, should I double park? Should I jaywalk? Those kind of things, and even some potentially bigger things, but you can't, and you could never say there's something that should never happen, like the example I gave. You could never say that should never be allowed. You can't possibly really have any place to ever try somebody, crimes against humanity and all that kind of stuff. I mean, Hitler should have gotten off. Bad boy. I can't say bad boy. He was doing what he wanted to do. You have to be willing to say there's no difference between your great-grandmother and Hitler, your great-grandmother and any evil person. There is no good or evil. She made you cookies. He gassed people. Yeah. They were both doing what they wanted to do. That's the way you really have to commit your life. If evil bothers you and you don't believe in God, then evil can't bother you. It's really a vicious circle.
Yeah.
If you're bothered by evil, we almost have to believe in a creator.
Nobody who doesn't believe in God thinks that way in this day and age. Not one.
Well, I think deep down, perhaps they don't. Maybe they don't realize it. Maybe they don't realize it, because most people will say that should never happen. And I'm like, I won't talk to you about that, because if you ever get somebody to say that should never be allowed, or that's always wrong, then you've got a starting point to talk to somebody about how do you know that? Why should it always be wrong for me as well? Why? So that's a good way to talk, because you're getting somebody to think and talk back with you, right? And I think that was it. Listen, thank you all for your patience. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about this. I'm still thinking, for anybody watching this on Facebook, that I will continue it, because what would happen from here is if you get somebody to think, okay, Christianity is this revelation from the Creator, and I'm giving that away, but I believe it is. And if you believe there's a reason to follow what the Bible teaches, well, how does that all fit with science, evolution? And people say the Bible has mistakes. Does it really, or does it not? So some of the things I will try to do, you thought the blood clotting cascade was tough. I'll put those things out on Facebook talking about evolution, science in the Bible. Doesn't Genesis say some strange things that science doesn't think is true? I mean, some of those kind of things. We'll talk about that over time. But this will end it for here. But please, if you're watching, come see us down at Lindsley Avenue, Sunday mornings, 9:40 for class, 10:30 for services. You'll find a group of people who simply want to follow Jesus and love others. So come join us sometime. Phil, would you close us the class anyway in prayer? Thank you again.
Dear Lord, thank you for this time together, and thank you for these mind-challenging, interesting, clarifying study we have done. We love you, God, and we know that you love us. We pray, Lord, you watch over us and forgive us of our sins, Lord. In Jesus' name, amen.